You're listening to the Iterators of the Imperium.
I'm MEZ. I'm here as always with the one and only Ryan. And today we're going to be talking about... You can take away, Ryan.
Oh, thanks. I always feel like we have no idea what we're doing with that intro. It starts off so well, and at the end of it, we're just like, wait, what are we doing here? Why are we here again?
I feel like it makes like a comedic relief to it, so I don't mind it, actually.
No, I'm not against it, but I just feel like it gets a little bit out of hand by the end of it, and we're both just sitting here like, do we know why we're here?
It's cool.
So last time we spoke about the kind of rise of humanity, I guess, for lack of a better term. It was like the early years of humanity. So we did the Age of Terra, which is up until about 15,000, I believe. And then we had the Golden Age of technology. And then we had the AI uprising and revolt and all that, where everything went terrible. And then we had the Age of Strife, which is Old Night, where everything was god-awful. And humanity was, all its colonies were scattered amongst the stars, and no one could talk to each other or get to each other. But then, with the birth of Slaanesh, because of the fall of the Eldar and their weird sex cults, that cleared up all the warp nonsense. So finally, the Emperor was able to start his crusade and start conquering the stars again in the name of humanity and the Imperial truth. So that led us up to about the 30th millennia, right? So about the year 30,000, right? So what we're talking about today is the Great Crusade, but there's different sections to it, because the Great Crusade kind of never stops after this point, because humanity is always trying to conquer the stars. But it kind of takes a backseat sometimes to more important events, so the ages are known in different ways. Also, because of events that occur, the crusade slows down massively at some points as well. Sometimes it becomes a war of attrition, try to keep to territory you've already got, or try to reclaim some worlds that you've briefly lost, stuff like that. So you're not always conquering. So what we're talking about today is from millennia 30 to 31, that kind of age, right?
Yes.
Which is just the real start of the Great Crusade. And in this time, you do have the Emperor going out and conquering the Star with the legions, but also finding all the Primarchs. In this time, there is a few things there's three main events we're going to discuss within this time. They all take place at different points in it by quite a large stage of time, but they're all really important for going forward. There are a lot of other major events that occur, but these are three that we have to talk about to be able to go on with the next major event that goes on in the galaxy, especially amongst humanity. So this is specifically going to be some events about the Emperor and the Primarchs, right? But they also shape the Imperium of Man as it goes forward in a way. All right?
Sounds good.
Yeah. So the reclamation of some of the planets, it wasn't always reclamation. Sometimes it was just conquering initially. So the Great Crusade involved finding planets that were lost, that were lost colonies, and just being like, new guys in charge, let's team up again, get back in here. It involved finding human colonies that, because of the length of time had occurred, basically just had new leaders. Some of them had an emperor already that just decided he was in charge. He had just rose to power on that planet or in that star system. And they had to fight humanity to conquer the planet just to instill the proper emperor. You know, the giant 14-foot god warrior.
Yeah. I've been Googling them.
Yeah, you had to instill that guy in some planets, even though they were already human. So not everyone was glad to see them, even though they were also part of humanity. And some of it was finding Xenos races, like the Eldar and Orcs and stuff like that, and battling them to take over planets. So it was a relatively not straightforward affair, as you might have assumed by conquering the galaxy as a title.
Nah, it's not straightforward. Like bish bosh and we out.
Yeah, exactly.
Ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. That kind of thing.
Yeah, not that easy, unfortunately. Also, one detail I'm going to throw at you now is that the Emperor is fully aware of chaos as it exists, right? So, he's an incredibly powerful psyker. He's been around for God knows how long. He has prophetic visions of the future. This dude knows about chaos. Actually, I believe chaos was involved in the making of the Primarchs. I believe that they had some warp magic fused into them as they were made. So he is well aware of chaos. He did not tell the Primarchs about chaos, or anyone. right?
Why?
Because he believed that the only way, or the main way, you would succumb to chaos would be by worshipping it, right?
Oh, and he's against,
Yeah, but if you don't know about chaos, you can't accidentally worship it, right? Which is total nonsense, because people accidentally worship it all the time. That's like 90% of religion in the galaxy, is people falsely worshipping what turns out to be chaos later. So it's a terrible idea, but the intention was good. If I don't tell anyone, they can't accidentally worship it. That was his logic, right? So it went hand in hand with Imperial truth, was also the Imperial not telling anyone anything.
Yeah.
No religion, but also like there is religion, but like we're not telling anyone about it.
But like keep that on a low.
Aye. So although he did tell Magnus about it. Magnus the Red. The main Primarch born that inherited the Emperor's gift for the warp, for using magic, right? He did tell him about it. So Magnus was the only person in the galaxy, in humanity's terms, obviously, other than the Emperor himself, who knew about chaos and the Immaterium properly as what they were. Because Magnus was obsessed with learning about it. He had this idea that he could one day control the Immaterium. He could control the warp. That's what he thought he could do if he learned enough. Right? Which is absurd.
Yeah.
But that's what he believed. And the Emperor did explain to him about the warp and how it worked to a degree, and about chaos, but it was like, this is how bad it actually is. Please stop doing this. Like, for the love of God, be careful. But Magnus was just like, sorcery, right? So the first event that we're going to talk about, the first major event we're going to talk about that occurred during this time, is called the Council of Nikea, right? Which it focuses around Magnus and Psykers and stuff within the Imperium. So Magnus, again, he inherited his father's gift for the warp. And the Emperor didn't believe that humanity was evolved enough to handle the warp correctly, which is why he tried to subdue it as a concept within humanity, right? It was like, look, we you guys cannot hack this. You're not wise enough to know how to use this properly and safely. So no, don't fucking use it. And it was, so there was more and more mutant human psychers being born. So it was becoming more common for the Crusade to come upon a planet that was led by some kind of psyker who had accidentally become a chaos thrall and was leading the planet against the Crusade. So they would fall to the planet thinking normal people, and then get attacked with all this psychic magic nonsense. So it was becoming a problem, more and more psychers existing. So unfortunately, those were the same kind of powers that Magnus and his Legion, the Thousand Sons, used in combat. Because he got his Legion to use it as well. It wasn't just him. All his guys, because they're born from his genes, also had an affinity for the warp. So they also used crazy warp powers to fight, which, wasn't good. It didn't make them sound like good guys. Because of that, Leman Russ, the Primarch of the Space Wolves, hated Magnus. Because Leman Russ believes that any tactics that involve sleight of hand or trickery is total bullshit. You are a fucking wuss. You are an
heretic.
Exactly. You are an embarrassment to the name of Astartes.
We're specimen of people I know.
Exactly. Right? So Leman Russ hated Magnus and hated his Legion because of this, and all his guys tended to hate them as well, because this is not how Space Marines fight, basically. This is a bullshit tactic, and you are you should be better than this kind of thing. So yeah. So Magnus got a few of the other Primarchs that believed that Psykers could be valuable assets together, and they formed a new training program for Space Marines, right? And this was, they would, rather than just finding a human who was better than the rest around him and doing all the procedures and training and stuff to turn them into a normal Space Marine, it was a new training thing where you would turn them into a Psyker Space Marine that actually used the psychic powers of the warp in combat. Also for other purposes, you could use it for strategic purposes and stuff like that as well. But they were essentially a psychic space marine. That was the gimmick. They were called librarians. So Magnus and a bunch of other Primarchs that believed this was a good thing to do got together and sorted out this program. And initially, the Emperor was like, okay, you're handling this in a reasonable manner, you're training them properly, okay, we'll see how it goes. So he allowed it for a while. But there was a bunch of Primarchs that just refused to fight alongside them. So any legion that employed librarians, Leman Russ of the Space Wolves, Corvus Corax of the Raven Guard, Mortarion of the Death Guard, and Rogal Dorn refused to have their legion fight alongside them on like Planetfall. They would not fight alongside them because they did not trust them or believe it was a good idea at all. So if you deployed any librarians to combat, these whole legions would just go, retreat. We're not doing it. We're not getting involved. Like, we're not fighting alongside something that's wielding the powers of our enemy, because how long is it until they turn against us or something like that?
Yeah.
Like, they don't know what they're doing and we don't trust them to do it properly. So our guys are going to be getting damaged because of this, stuff like that. So there was a million reasons that they just refused to fight alongside them. So this caused a lot of animosity between some of the legions and the Primarchs. And the Emperor noticed this and was like, alright, this is causing a lot of hassle. So we need to talk about it. We need to organize this once and for all. So they had this thing called the Council of Nikea, which was essentially a big debate in which the Emperor was presiding over. And both sides would present their arguments, and then the Emperor would decide how this was to be handled and what rules should be set in place, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So the debate was on like one side, you had people arguing against it, like the Primarchs that disagreed, and the Sisters of Silence, which are an order of the Battle Nuns. That they are all like blanks, so they turn off psychic powers. So they're used specifically to fight psychers. So they've seen like the worst of the worst at this point in the galaxy for what happens with Chaos Spawn and evil psychers, right? So it was them explaining the kind of stuff they fought against and why it's so dangerous, and how even people that were doing good with these powers are sometimes overtaken by them and stuff like that. So they are really dangerous, and it can happen in an instant. It could be in the middle of a battle and they just suddenly are overwhelmed and start fighting the wrong guys. Like, so it was Sisters of Battle and people like that talking against it, and then people like Magnus the Red arguing that it was a good idea. So you had stuff like Magnus argued that no knowledge is inherently evil. It's just the way it's used can be, and the people that use it can be. But the knowledge itself isn't evil. Stuff like that. And unfortunately... Yeah?
I'm sorry, is it kind of like the mindset of, you know, obviously there's people going around streets shanking people down with a knife, you know, but does that make the people selling the knife bad? Is that kind of the thing?
That similar, yeah. It's more like... basically, yeah, it's like the argument for gun control in America and stuff like that. It's guns don't kill people. People with guns kill people.
People
it's like
kill
that.
people. Yeah.
Yes, it's like that argument essentially. Magnus is the one standing there going, just because I have a gun doesn't make me evil. I'm allowed to want to have the thing. I'm allowed to learn about the thing. I'm allowed to be good at using the thing. There's no reason that any of that's evil. It's only once a person is corrupted that they are evil. So he was also kind of arguing that the point of like, don't condemn someone because they have potential to do something wrong. Like, a Space Marine is an unstoppable killing force, essentially. But they're not seen as evil. But a Space Marine with his normal bolt gun is equally as dangerous to a human populace as one evil psyker is.
Yeah, it has the power to destroy, like... I get what you mean. It's kind of the same thing I wanted to come across with my point with the knives, but obviously a gun control in America and stuff like that.
It's a solid example that's around.
It's a solid example, actually. So, yeah, I do like it.
Yeah, so it was that kind of argument that Magnus was trying to levy, that there isn't anything necessarily wrong with having and using the powers or learning about this stuff. It's only once people start doing things wrong with it that something needs to be done, really. But everyone else on the opposite side was like, but it's too dangerous to do that, because corruption in these ways can lie dormant for ages. It can be behind the scenes. It can be corrupting governments. It can be an entire planet is corrupted before anyone even notices. It was that kind of argument. The scale of how badly this can go wrong is too much to risk it, was the kind of opposing argument. So this went on for a bit. Unfortunately for Magnus, this was also his trial for crimes he had levied against him, because sorcery was still a crime at this point. So Magnus lay accused of acts of sorcery and incantation, and also instilling these things, or introducing these things, to the Space Marine ranks. Because his guys weren't librarians. He had normal Space Marines that were untrained officially as librarians. So normal Space Marines as like foot soldiers using warp powers. So they weren't even part of like the one training program for these guys that the Emperor had agreed to. So these were all seen as actual crimes that he was now being accused of in this trial. In his arguing to try to like convince everyone that there was nothing inherently wrong with learning about this stuff, he basically admitted to everything that he was accused of. So the Emperor ended up going out in like a blind rage, and he laid down a bunch of like rules after this because of this situation. The first of which is that Magnus is not allowed to do sorcery, and he's to stop researching anything to do with sorcery and like the etheric arts. He's not looking at any of it anymore. They also got rid of the librarians and all psychers that weren't navigators or astropaths. So the ones that communicate between ships using the warps, and the ones that use their like weird third eye to navigate through the warp. They're the only ones that were allowed to be psychers now, officially speaking, or allowed to do anything about it. And he also created a role within all the legions called Chaplains. Right? There's a legion called the Word Bearers who had chaplains as a role, and what they essentially did was their job was to make sure the legion stuck to the imperial truth, right? So the Emperor also instilled this role in every legion. Every legion had to have a chaplain now, whose job it was to guide the legion to stick to the imperial truth. So no religion and all the other stuff that the Emperor was instilling in all the planets that they took over. So that was a pretty big deal. That's how the Council of Nikea really went down. Essentially, Magnus got dragged up in front of everyone and got his ass smacked by his dad. Psychers, not good. Not good as far as the Imperium is concerned at this point. For the record, this in no way dissuaded Magnus from researching this stuff or using sorcery. He just kept doing it anyway. It was just like, I should probably not do this in front of certain people now. Luckily, Magnus is a giant red-skinned, like, cyclops. So, like, whether he's magic or not, he'll still just pick you up and throw you a mile. So, like, even if he was being careful about it, he didn't have to, like, worry about losing a fight because he wasn't throwing magic at people. I
saw you did this. No, you didn't.
Like, you saw it, fuck all.
You saw nothing.
Yeah, that was essentially. So that was one of the main things that went down. So the next major event we're going to talk about is, I've titled it Monarchia, but it's about Lorgar, who is one of the Primarchs, who is the leader of the Word Bearers, the guys that had the chaplains. Lorgar was raised on a wildly religious planet, but they were polytheistic. They believed in multiple gods, right? But it was more like as a concept rather than like the Romans had gods that they named every single one of, and they all did individual things. This planet, as far as I'm aware, wasn't quite as like refined in their beliefs. It was more, they believed that there was a group of gods and that they controlled different things and stuff like that. And they worshipped them as an entire planet. Everyone was into this, right? You didn't get to live on this planet and not be religious. And Lorgar was raised by an exiled priest, and he grew up as a believer, right? He also worshipped this religion while he was growing up. And because he's a Primarch, and they're all incredibly impressive and ridiculously charismatic and all this stuff, he ended up building a following, right? But the way this happened was because as he studied as he was growing up, he found that he believed that rather than the pantheon of gods that they had, he believed there was a one god, one individual god that tied it all together. And this belief kind of spread as he preached it, and he ended up with like quite a large following on the planet. When the Emperor arrived with Magnus the Red, by the way. For some reason, the two of them rocked up on this planet together. Not that that matters, but Lorgar thought the Emperor was the one god he was looking for. So the religious following he had very quickly reformed into worship of the Emperor, thinking he is the one god that they've worshipped this entire time, finally stood in front of them as this 14-foot tall man with godly powers. Which is fair, like I see where they're coming from. They had like a big 6-month-long celebration, which kind of annoyed the Emperor because he wanted to go crusading. But eventually, after all that, the Emperor gave Lorgar his legion, which were called the Imperial Heralds. Lorgar renamed them to the Word Bearers because they carried the word of the Emperor. And then they started crusading and taking over planets and stuff. Skip forward a huge chunk of time, and the Emperor finds out that Lorgar's legion is taking over planets much slower than all the other legions, right? They're just not progressing fast enough. So he's like, that's weird, I'm gonna go find out why. And when he looks into it, he finds out that Lorgar hasn't been conquering planets, he's been religiously converting them to worship of the Emperor and instilling a church. Naturally, this displeases the Emperor.
For God's sake, you had one job,
right? This is this is the one thing you're not supposed to do, man. Like, this guy did his job about as wrong as you possibly could do your job.
Oh God.
Yeah, so that was a problem. So the Emperor was like, right, this has to be stopped right fucking now. Right, this is enough of this. So he tasked Rabuta Gilliman, the leader of the Ultramarines, the Blue Boy Scouts, the ones that love rules and stuff, right?
Yeah.
He tasked them with essentially putting an end to this right here and now. So there was a whole thing where there was a planet that was Lorgar's favorite called Monarchia, which is like the perfect city, essentially. And it was like the shining diamond of his like conquered area because it was perfect and it was ridiculous and huge. Lorgar's legion was like forcibly removed from the planet, and then the legion that Rabuta Gilliman brought with him burned the planet to the ground, and the Emperor, his right-hand man, Malcador the Sigilite, who I'll talk about a little bit at the end of this, actually, because I haven't introduced you to him yet, and Rabuta Gilliman and the Ultramarines just burned the planet to the ground and forced him to watch. And then the Emperor, like, explained to him why this is not okay, why this is the last thing he should have been doing, and all this kind of stuff. Which is not great, because then Lorgar just, like, went into seclusion for, like, months on end and didn't see anyone or talk to anyone. He eventually turned up again and continued the crusade, like, properly, but, like, he was a bit of a different guy now. It had took a serious toll on him watching his planet burn. So that's the whole Monarchia event. It's not a particularly long affair, luckily. There's more detail you can go into about it, but it's really not all that necessary. And the third event we're going to talk about it's the last thing that happens in this section of the Great Crusade. It's called the Ulenor Crusade. So there was a planet system called Ulenor. They have a thing where they stop naming individual planets eventually. So, like, if they found our solar system, right, and they figure out that the main planet is Earth, right, so in this point it would be Terra, right, what they would do is they would name that one planet whatever it is, so Terra in our case, and then they would just number all of them. So you'd have Terra, and then you'd have, like, Terra 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth, for the rest of the planets, rather than giving them all individual names for the most of the time. Sometimes a planet will have an individual name, but it's rare beyond its star system. In this case, it's a star system called Ulenor, and the main planet is called Ulenor. right? But outlying worlds will usually have the same name and numbers and stuff like that. So Ulenor was a orc empire led by an overlord called Urlak Urg, which is a great name. Orcs have great
Funny
names
name.
in this.
Yep. And they speak funny.
They do. They speak Scottish. I'm going to be honest. They all just speak in Scottish slang. If you listen to any of the audiobooks, I've listened to a bunch of them. I think I've listened to like 14 audiobooks at this point or something like that. And every time there's orcs, the guy just does a Scottish accent, and it's hilarious. Because it's always like some American dude doing a Scottish accent to try and talk like an orc. It's so funny, and they always do it weird and wrong, and it's great.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I love it. So Ulenor is an orc empire, and its overlord is Urlak Urg, and basically the Space Marine legions assaulted this empire to try and wipe the orcs out once and for all, right, in this area. And the assault consisted of multiple legions. So you had the Ultramarines and the White Scars, with 8 million of the Imperial army, right? So 8 million normal soldiers, as well as the Space Marine legions, assaulted outlying planets, while Horus and the Luna Wolves decided to make a full frontal assault on the homeworld, on the capital, where the Overlord was. Horus is a big fan of going right down the middle in any conflict. So they just went straight for the enemy command center. So his legion assaults the main planet. And then him personally, his first captain, so his second in command, and a couple of squads of Terminators. So it's like, they're Space Marines, but they're in Terminator armor, which is like heavy duty armor. It essentially makes you a walking tank, where you give up a small amount of mobility for a massive amount of like fortitude.
Yeah.
These guys teleported directly to the foot of the Overlord's tower and then assaulted it. His second in command, Abaddon the Despoiler, he was later reading, but at this point he's just Abaddon. He and a bunch of the Terminators go to the Overlord's chambers, and Horus himself goes and finds the Overlord and challenges him in like one-on-one combat.
Mano el mano.
Essentially, yeah. And he absolutely murders this gigantic orc. Like, the orc is significantly bigger than him, but Horus is, well, he's on Primarch. He is an absolute unit of a man, but he has tactics, he has strategy, he's well trained.
Yeah.
Orcs are brutal. So if you put one-on-one, Horus was absolutely miles beyond the orc and just murdered him, broke him.
It's kind of like brains versus balls, you know, straight up.
Yeah, it's essentially that. Yes.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
So Horus absolutely decimates this orc, then carries him to the roof of the tower and throws him off. Throws his broken corpse off the tower into like the war going on below. Which is a good way to make a statement that your warlord's dead, I guess.
I was about to say that's a good symbol for like, yeah, you guys lost.
That's essentially what he was doing. He was like, I need this war to be over fast, because I cannot be bothered anymore. How can I make it clear that the warlord's dead to everyone? Yeet! Straight off the tower.
You didn't have to say yeet, but yeah.
I feel like he did, though. I feel like he shouted yeet as he threw him, just to make a point. But like Primarch yeet, where you just like... So yeah, Horus yeets Urlak Urg off the tower of his command center, and then as word spread amongst the enemy ranks, basically their morale was broken, and the enemy army was broken. Basically, they just started to fall apart, and the Space Marines quickly demolished them, for lack of a better term. Now, this was a big deal. The Emperor decided to declare this a monumentous triumph and celebrated the event. So they were going to hold a parade. For the record, for the scale of the parade they wanted to throw, the Emperor had the Mechanicus flatten a continent.
What?
Yeah. They had like mega dozers, like massive terraforming machines, just perfectly level an entire continent.
Because, oh god.
Right? And then they like built a giant road and all this stuff for a parade to go along, and they had like everyone that could possibly matter in the entirety of humankind be there to witness this parade to celebrate their triumph.
I mean, well deserved. A round of applause.
Yeah, I mean, look, well done to them. Horus yeeted a man from a balcony. Like, if that's not worth celebrating, I don't know what is. So this parade involved units of the Militaris, so the standard military that they had now formed. It had units from the Mechanicus celebrating because they fought alongside everyone else. It had the Titanicus Legions, so they're the gigantic war robots. They had some of those guys going on. That's why they needed a continent-sized one. These things are like 500 feet tall, so you need a big road. But also, you would have had like millions of normal soldiers and space marines and everything all together. So you need a big-ass road for a parade like that.
Yeah.
And then it had 14 space marine legions. So it had the Luna Wolves in Horus. It had the Blood Angels with Sanguinius, you know, your favourite. You had the Death Guard with Mortarion, the Thousand Suns with Magnus, the World Eaters, the White Scars, the Word Bearers, Imperial Fists, Emperor's Children, Raven Guard, Salamanders, Ultramarines, Iron Hands, and the Dark Angels. You had most of the Space Marine legions all here at one time. I think this is the last time that many of them are ever together, to be honest with you. And the Primarchs too were also there. So this is a huge event. And the Emperor used this as an opportunity to announce something. He titled Horus as War Master because the Emperor was going to retire back to Terra to work on a secret project that he refused to divulge details of. And Horus was going to take his place, leading the Imperium in its crusade across the galaxy. So all the other Primarchs would now answer to him, as would all the legions, as if he were the Emperor.
Yeah.
Obviously, this caused a lot of issues because a lot of the Primarchs didn't like that concept. They either didn't like pretending that Horus was in any way deserving of being in the Emperor's position, or they just disagreed that Horus should be the one in charge. So, like, the Dark Angels, their leader, Lionel Johnson, he thought he should be in charge. Then you've got ones, I believe Lehman Russ, the leader of Space Wolves, just didn't like someone other than the Emperor being in charge. Stuff like that. But also there was divisive issues amongst it because you had stuff like the already existing conflicts among the Primarchs.
Primarchs, yeah.
Yeah, about stuff like Lehman Russ hating Magnus the Red because he's a sorcerer. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
You had already settled in feuds that were currently going on, and if one side agreed that Horus should be in charge or was closer to Horus, right? So say, for example, that Sanguinius had a feud with one of the other Primarchs, right? Horus and Sanguinius were like the best of friends ever. So you'd have the issue of, if Horus is now in charge, you've now got Sanguinius has his ear. So now Sanguinius is in more power as well. So you had that kind of thing. A lot of the Primarchs that were already feuding saw Horus being in charge, now kind of on the side of the one they were feuding with and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there was a lot of reasons that a lot of the Primarchs didn't like this. But the Emperor was still overall in charge. He wasn't ceding his position or anything like that. He was just, I've got stuff I need to go work on Earth. And he didn't tell anyone what it was. So that's as far as we need to go with the Ulenor Crusade. So after this, we get into talking about like the story of Horus as the War Master and stuff like that, and everything that goes on with that, because that causes some issues, as you might guess.
Good imagine.
So that's probably going to be a big 3-part thing, possibly 4, depending on how I lay it out. But this didn't take nearly as long as I thought it was going to. So we have a bit of time where we can talk about a few different things, a few little bits of random stuff. So one thing I prompted myself there was I want to mention Malcador the Sigilite to you.
Yes.
So Malcador the Sigilite is the Emperor's right-hand man. He is potentially the second strongest psyker in humanity. Like, not enough to rival the Emperor, but he is immensely powerful.
What was his name?
Malcador the Sigilite. I don't know if he and Magnus are on the same footing, or if one is stronger than the other. I don't know how they bear in regards to each other, but the idea has always been that the Emperor is the most powerful, and then Malcador is his right-hand man. So I assume Malcador and Magnus are probably on similar playing fields when it comes to the warp.
Yeah.
Malcador is not only like his right-hand man for combat and stuff like that, it's also he's also yes, that is a picture of Malcador you just sent me.
That's the right-hand man.
That's the dude. He's a normal human, by the way. He's not augmented in any way, shape, or form. He's not a space marine or nothing. He's just a normal human. He's just an incredibly powerfully magic human.
I mean, I can see there's also tubes in his like neck.
Yeah, he's like everyone's a bit weird at a certain point when it comes to that. But yeah,
nah, it's just accessories, stylish.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah. It's a bit weird, dude. It kind of reminds me of the merchant from Resident Evil 4. You just find him standing in a dark alleyway with a flaming staff. You're like, all right, no, well, I'm gonna go. You have fun, man. But yeah, he's not only his right-hand man for like combat and stuff, he's also like his man for like matters of state. So he's like his closest advisor for all that kind of stuff as well. For example, during the Great Crusade, there are a bunch of orders organized by Malcador the Sigilite for the Emperor. So I was probably going to mention these in individual episodes, but actually they're not going to have a place to be mentioned in the 3-parter that we're going to do because it's not related. So I may as well mention them now. There are 3 orders set up amongst humanity. I believe they're referred to as the threat within, the threat without, and the threat beyond. I believe that's how it's worded. But they are the Ordo Hereticus, the Ordo Xenos, and the Ordo Malleus. Right? They're all essentially like their own legion. Not all of them work using Space Marines, but they're all designed for different for individual concepts, right?
Yeah. So
the Ordo Hereticus is the threat within. So they're designed, and their entire job is to root out corruption within humanity's own ranks. So if there is like a chaos corruption inflicting planets and stuff, that's where these guys have to take hold and take charge and deal with it, root it out from its source. Stop the threat that comes from within humanity. You then have the Ordo Xenos, which I believe are the Death Guard. No, not the Death Guard. The Death Watch. So these guys are funny, right? These are Space Marines. Their job is to take out aliens, right? The Ordo Xenos, their entire job is to fight aliens, right? But they can't really recruit normal humans and turn them into Space Marines very much. So the way they're usually formed is if you do something wrong as a Space Marine, you will have a trial and you will be you will have like a judgment cast upon you, and sometimes your punishment can be being relegated to the Death Watch, because essentially all they do is suicide missions.
Oh god.
Right? So they're like, oh, you're a criminal, all right, well here's your job, take back that planet from the orcs. And you're like, okay, so you get put in this legion, essentially, made up of scraps of all the other legions that have, like, one squad barely survives because they woosed out in combat or something. So they're now all criminals. So you've got, like, guys from every legion in one squad that are all essentially criminals in the Imperium's eyes, sent into one conflict to try and take out aliens. So take back this entire planet, right? Which is hilarious. But the thing is, like, I'll be like, take back that planet, and then you can come back to your legion. And you're like, we don't expect you to come back, but, like, if you do, fair enough, on you go. Go back to the Salamander, man. Which is really funny.
The thing is, you won't make it anyway. So.
Yeah, you're not coming back one way or another, but, like, if you can, like, sure.
If by coincidence or some miraculous coincidence that you do, well...
Yeah, like, sure, we got somewhere for you to go if you make it back, but you're probably going to be in a bag. Like, and the third order that Malcador sets up is the Grey Knights, is what they're called. Their job is 100% to fight chaos, right? after the during and after the Great Crusade, chaos starts to take hold on more planets. So like some of the psychers or natural psychers that are like mutants will be taken by chaos. They'll be corrupted and they'll turn to that side. And then chaos starts to fester on that planet. So you end up with a planet that can be entirely infected by crazy plagues and stuff. And then people start to turn into like Nurgle's rotted monsters and demons and stuff like that. So you'll have an entire planet that is now just corrupted by Nurgle's chaos. So that needs to be dealt with. So Malcador, on orders from the Emperor, organized an entire legion of Space Marines to fight purely chaos. So that's the only thing they're there for, called the Grey Knights. And they just wear grey armor top to bottom. And what he did was he found a bunch of people that were supposed to be the founding members of this chapter. So they were supposed to be like some of the best commanders, trainers, and like organizers. So some of them were just humans that were really good at politics and like diplomacy and stuff, that were supposed to organize it and run it. Whereas you had Space Marine captains and stuff that were supposed to train them and all that kind of stuff. And he built them a massive base. I think it was on a moon of Mars. It's on Titan, but I can't remember what planet that's a moon of. And then he used crazy warp magic, because he's an absolute beast, to phase it out of reality for like 1,000 years. So the planet was just like non-existent for like millennia. Yeah. And they had a massive fortress full of everything they needed to found an entire chapter of Space Marines. And they had these people in charge to now run it. And they also had thousands upon thousands of potential recruits. So when that planet finally phases back into reality, with them comes back an order of Space Marines that are perfectly built to murder chaos in all of its forms. All of them, or no, most of them are like psychers as well, that have been specially trained to use their magic to help them fight chaos and to protect themselves from chaos. So they're nigh on uncorruptible, while also being immensely powerful in terms of defeating chaos as well. And they also have specialized technology for fighting chaos. A lot of it is like a combination of like stuff to use your warp magic through to cause certain effects, stuff like that. To either ward them or to destroy chaos, stuff like that. So that's the kind of guy Malcador is. He organizes this kind of stuff for the Emperor. But he's also like his best friend. He's a cool guy. The new Warhammer game that just came out like a month ago is actually you play as the Grey Knights fighting chaos. It's very cool.
Yeah. Have you played that, by the way?
I have, yes. It doesn't run very well on my computer, unfortunately.
I was about to say we could stream that. If any of you guys wanted to watch that, we do also have some streams on Twitch. We have done one before with Ryan, you actually made with the nuns.
Yes, I was building my Battle Sister squad. There is a bunch of new Warhammer 40k games coming out, though. In September, I believe we have Dark Tide, which is like a hack and slash set in 40k. There was a bunch of them set in fantasy before called Vermintide. But this is the first one set in 40k. So you play as Space Marines and stuff like that, fighting Chaosborn. But it's in like massive hordes of them, which is very cool. It's like a zombie fighter. It's great. There's tons of them.
And we probably are going to be streaming that.
We 100% will be. I was talking to Simon about it earlier today. We're definitely going to be doing that. There's a new one that I've just heard about yesterday, I believe, which is like an open world adventure game. But it's a CRPG, so you've kind of got like a bit of a top-down view, and it's like Dungeons and Dragons style, where you get to just explore the world, do what you want, you make your own character, you design their skills, all that kind of stuff. I don't know to what degree that is. I'm assuming you just fill a role that already exists within 40k, but it's the first one set in 40k, and the company that's making it are incredible. So I'm expecting huge things from it. We're gonna have to do a co-op playthrough of that as well, if it has co-op, which usually they do nowadays, to be honest with you. Which would be really fun, because you'd get to like build your own character within the world. And since you're currently learning, hopefully you've got some cool ideas about what that'll mean by the time we get to that game. Because I don't know if it's going to be like playing as Space Marines and you get to choose what kind of type, like if you want to be a librarian or like an interceptor or whatever, or if it's going to be like anything from it. So if you could be a member of like the Mechanicum, or Space Marines, or Inquisitors, or Grey Knights, or I don't know to what degree it's controllable, but it has huge potential.
Yes, and we will be checking it out. So please, guys, go and watch our Twitch.
We will be keeping updates on this kind of stuff on Twitter as well, so keep an eye on that one. There isn't much else I need to say about this at this point, because we're right ready set to get into possibly one of the coolest parts of the entire Humanity storyline. Possibly one of the coolest parts of the entire 40k storyline. But is there anything you want to ask about? Because we're still a little bit early on this one. So if you want to ask any questions, we got a little bit of time.
Nah, it's cool. It's cool. I am though looking forward to the next part we're coming into, because it sounds intriguing. Let me say it like that. You have been hyping it up, and I hope the listeners
it's going to be good.
Hyped about it too.
It's going to be good. It focuses mainly around Horus. I imagine anyone listening to this that knows anything about 40k knows exactly what's about to happen. And I'm hoping they are too, but I'm very excited to see your reaction to it.
All right.
So it should be good fun. But
yeah,
until then, we will catch you guys next time on the next episode of the Iterators of the Imperium. Bye.
Sir.